The headlines out of Western Canada today have left political insiders and everyday citizens buzzing with speculation, whispers, and more than a few nervous glances toward Ottawa. Alberta and Saskatchewan, two provinces with long histories of standing shoulder to shoulder on economic and cultural issues, are now being linked in rumors of something much larger, something that could change the balance of power in this country forever. Now, nobody in official circles is confirming anything, but here's what has people talking. The suggestion that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe are quietly working together on what some are already calling a Western Bloc. Not just a partnership on energy, not just a joint declaration about Ottawa's policies, but potentially the foundation of a coordinated political and economic front. Let's be clear, the idea of a Western Bloc isn't new. Over the decades, premiers across the prairies have talked about uniting their voices to push back against federal decisions they say ignore Western interests. But this moment feels different. Why? Because of the timing, because of the secrecy, and because the stakes, both politically and economically, have never been higher. Think about the last 2 years. Ottawa, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, has rolled out sweeping climate policies, carbon targets, and federal oversight measures that directly cut into provincial control of energy development. These policies hit Alberta and Saskatchewan harder than anywhere else. Oil, gas, potash, agriculture, these aren't just industries in those provinces, they're lifelines. And when you have premiers who feel Ottawa is threatening those lifelines, it creates the perfect conditions for a deeper, more serious alliance. Now, the whispers are getting louder. Reports of closed-door meetings, strategy sessions where neither province has been willing to share details publicly. Meetings not announced on official schedules. A handful of insiders say documents have even circulated outlining proposals for joint energy grids, cross-border trade agreements with U.S. states, and coordinated resistance to federal taxation. None of that has been confirmed, but when so many pieces line up, people start connecting the dots. And here's where the tension rises. If Alberta and Saskatchewan really are building something like a Western Bloc, what would it mean for the rest of Canada? Because suddenly, it wouldn't just be one province challenging Ottawa. It would be two powerful resource-driven provinces standing together. Together, they control more than 60% of Canada's oil production, huge portions of global potash exports, and some of the most strategically valuable farmland on the continent. Imagine the leverage that creates. Ottawa, of course, can't ignore that possibility. Prime Minister Carney has tried to present himself as a steady hand, a financial expert who can keep Canada unified through turbulent global times. But his relationship with the West has been rocky from the start. Critics in Alberta and Saskatchewan accuse him of pandering to central Canadian voters while treating the West as a piggy bank. His defenders say Carney is just enforcing national priorities. But either way, the trust is eroding, and when trust erodes, alliances start forming in the shadows. The real question is this: are we watching the earliest stages of a political shift that could destabilize Confederation itself? Because a Western Bloc, even unofficially, wouldn't just be about economics. It would be about power, about voice, about telling Ottawa, we don't need to wait for you to listen, we'll speak louder, together. Consider how the United States might react. American officials have always had a keen interest in Western Canadian energy. If Alberta and Saskatchewan move to negotiate cross-border deals together, Washington would likely pay attention, and quickly. That kind of cross-provincial cooperation could give the West enormous bargaining power, bypassing Ottawa and dealing directly with American markets. Again, nothing official has been announced, but the possibility is enough to set off alarm bells in Ottawa. And here's where things take an even more dramatic turn. Insiders claim some provincial staffers have used the term exit strategy in private. Not necessarily meaning separation, but meaning contingency planning, preparing for what happens if Ottawa refuses to bend. Could it simply mean greater autonomy? A stronger negotiating bloc? Maybe. But when people start hearing the phrase exit strategy in the same breath as Alberta and Saskatchewan, you can bet the speculation spreads like wildfire. Danielle Smith, of course, has never hidden her willingness to challenge federal authority. From pension plans to policing, she's floated ideas that signal Alberta might go its own way if Ottawa won't compromise. Scott Moe has often been quieter, but no less firm in his conviction that Saskatchewan's interests are being trampled. Put the two of them together, working quietly in unison, and you get a scenario Ottawa can't afford to ignore. Now, why the secrecy? Why not announce a formal alliance if that's what's happening? Well, secrecy creates leverage. If Ottawa doesn't know exactly what Alberta and Saskatchewan are planning, it keeps the federal government guessing, worried, and maybe more willing to cut deals. It also gives both premiers space to test the waters without committing. Think of it as political chess. Every move calculated, every gesture layered with meaning, every silence just as loud as a speech. But secrecy also fuels suspicion. If people believe a Western Bloc is forming in the dark, they might assume the worst. They might start believing this is the first step toward separation, or even the creation of a brand new political entity. And the longer officials stay silent, the more those suspicions grow. And it's not just Alberta and Saskatchewan watching this unfold. British Columbia, with its own tensions over federal energy policy, could be tempted to join if the bloc becomes real. Manitoba, too, has long complained of being sidelined by Ottawa's decisions. If this were ever to expand beyond two provinces, the very architecture of Canadian federalism could start to crack. But remember, nothing has been confirmed. These are whispers, hints, fragments of a story that might be bigger than anyone is willing to admit right now. The fact that so many people are asking questions, that's what makes this moment historic. Because when the public starts demanding answers, leaders are forced to respond. And so far, the responses have been vague, evasive, and cautious. That, in itself, speaks volumes. There's another angle to this story that isn't being talked about nearly enough, and it may be the most revealing of all. It's not just about what Alberta and Saskatchewan might be building together, but about what they're withholding from Ottawa. You see, both provinces have access to enormous amounts of data, economic forecasts, energy production numbers, export potential, even secretive investment talks with foreign partners. Normally, much of that information flows through federal channels. But lately, some insiders claim the provinces are tightening their grip on those numbers, sharing less with Ottawa and more with each other. That might not sound like much, but in politics, information is power. If Alberta and Saskatchewan are pooling their data privately, while starving Ottawa of insight, they're effectively building their own intelligence network. And that could allow them to anticipate, prepare for, and counter federal moves long before Carney's cabinet even knows what's happening. And then there's the symbolic side. Watch carefully. Small gestures like shared press releases, joint letters to federal ministers, premiers showing up at the same events with carefully worded messages. These may look routine, but when you line them up side by side, they start to form a pattern. A pattern that suggests coordination, not just coincidence. Even more curious? The way both provinces are suddenly engaging more directly with international partners. Saskatchewan, for instance, has been making headlines with its potash exports to countries desperate for stable food supply chains. Alberta, meanwhile, continues to dominate discussions on global energy security. Separately, these efforts are significant. Together, they could form the backbone of a Western-led foreign policy, something provinces aren't supposed to have. If they're building those relationships now, it raises the question: are they preparing to act as a united force on the global stage? So where does this leave us? In a moment of suspense. A moment where the future of Canada's unity feels less certain than it did yesterday. Alberta and Saskatchewan might simply be strengthening ties, preparing to negotiate harder with Ottawa. Or they might be laying the groundwork for something far more disruptive. The truth is hidden, at least for now, behind closed doors and carefully chosen words. But one thing is undeniable. The political temperature in this country is rising. And if the rumors are even half true, we are standing on the edge of a shift that could redefine the Canadian Federation. Whether it's a Western Bloc, a bargaining strategy, or something even more dramatic, all eyes are now fixed on two premiers, Danielle Smith and Scott Moe, and the quiet but seismic moves they may be making together. And while Ottawa may try to project calm, behind the scenes, you can be sure of one thing: the federal government is worried. Because the last thing Mark Carney wants on his hands is the birth of a united Western Front that challenges his authority and shakes the foundation of this country. For now, we're left with speculation, silence, and suspense. But history has a way of revealing itself, and when it does, the answers could change everything we thought we knew about Canada's future.